morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Hello? Wait, hang on. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Urmi.
Wait, hang on. I'm just trying to adjust this thing to the best of my ability. Right. I think. Yeah. Okay. What happened? Why is it there?
Shall we start?
Yes, we can start. We may start.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today here for this first webinar from the series of webinars that we will be doing through the next week on various aspects of ESG. ESG is a topic and a concern which is very close to our hearts here at GHCL. And so we have here with us today Ms. Urmi Goswami from the Economic Times, who will share what living in an environmentally constrained world it is and how we can transform our economy and society to tackle the triple environmental crisis. Just to quickly run you guys through the format is that after her session, Urmi will be happy to take any questions that you may have, which we request you to share with us through the chat option, and we will take them up one by one. Okay. And so before we begin, I would just very briefly like to introduce Urmi Goswami to all of you. Like I said earlier, Urmi Goswami is an assistant editor with the Economic Times. She writes about climate change, the impact, science, domestic policy and action, international negotiations, and international and regional collaboration. She has also written on issues related to the environment, energy transition, sustainability, and sustainable development. As a member of the edit team at Economic Times, Urmi is responsible for helping fashion the newspaper's position on foreign policy issues, social sector, environment, and climate change and sustainability. She has attended international climate negotiations since 2009 and the Conference of Parties in Copenhagen in Denmark. She was a UNFCCC Complex Fellow from 2011 to 2014. Urmi has also covered various meetings of the United Nations Environment Programme, the United Nations Environment Assembly beginning in 2014, and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services meeting in 2019. You may often hear Urmi on radio and see her on public service television, sharing her expertise about climate change, environment, and sustainability. She is also a contributing author to Beat Reporting and Editing, Journalism in the Digital Age. She has also authored a children's book called Pollution Solution for a Cleaner, Greener Earth, which has been released by the Terry Press in 2020-22. So, so I think I'll have to stop short because her achievements, I could go on and on, but then I think I'll let Urmi take over. So, yes, Urmi, it's up to you now.
Okay. Thank you, Deepika, and welcome everybody to this rush through version of dealing with living in an environmentally constrained world. As Deepika mentioned, you're doing a series of webinars. This is, in one sense, an omnibus which should give you a sense of all the different aspects that come with dealing with this issue. To begin with, one thing that I would like to mention is that we are at a very interesting point in our history as human beings. We are yet again at a point where we will fundamentally transform ourselves. We will change the way we do many things, the way we produce, the way we consume, the way we interact with the world in many ways. And it is in transforming our economy and our society that we will be able to deal with the biggest challenge that we face today, which is the environmental crisis. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So what is the triple environmental crisis, and why are we talking about it, and not just about climate change like we normally end up talking? It is the triple environmental crisis represents the three areas where it is broadly an environmental crisis. So you have climate change, your pollution, and your biodiversity loss. What is interesting is once you start looking at these three separate, quote unquote, separate buckets, you'll realize that there's a symbiotic relationship between them. So climate change, biodiversity loss drives climate change, and climate change drives pollution, and pollution drives climate change, and so on. So they're all symbiotically related. So what happens effectively is that if you take one solution, or you're looking at a solution that addresses one issue, there is every possibility that what is a solution in one area will end up becoming a problem for another of these crises. The best example I can think about is how we deal with refrigerants. So in 2005, you had the Montreal Protocol, which was about reducing the ozone, the hole in the ozone layer, and it was discovered that scientists found that the refrigerants, the chemicals we were using in our refrigerators and air coolers and other cooling systems were contributing to the ozone hole, and of a hole, creating a hole in the ozone. And the problem with creating a hole in the ozone was that that protective layer that you had was being eroded, and you had things like acid rain and so on. It's not a problem that we face so much in developing countries because of the nature of the imbalance of use of refrigerants. Like that was in 2005. The Montreal Protocol was done in 2005, but the conversation on the problem started earlier, and today, so let's say almost 20 years later, only 34% of households in India have an air conditioner. So you can imagine what it was like then, and why we didn't face we were not facing the problem in the same way as perhaps we would have done today if the problem had not been addressed. But lo and behold, the world came together, and they said we have to use better refrigerants. And we started using better refrigerants, only to discover that these refrigerants were adding to global warming. So you closed the hole in the ozone layer, but you ended up having a new problem. And that is why in 2016, the world came together again to negotiate and say, how do we start using better refrigerants? What is the plan, the roadmap towards that, so that the first problem is solved, the second problem is also addressed. So why I mention this is it is always important to remember the triple environmental crisis, so that we don't pick on solutions that address one and create a problem in the other without considering what that problem is and how we can try and solve it. And which is why economists and experts call the environmental crisis a super wicked problem. It's like trying to balance a three-legged stool, which may or may not have differing lengths of legs. So therefore, it's always a big balancing game. So why again why again is a triple environmental crisis something that we should concern ourselves about? Because it is something that forces us to think not just in the short term. So you're thinking short, medium, and long term all at the same time. You're thinking laterally. So you have to think as systems. And you're already, remember I spoke about the fact that it will transform the way our economy and our society. This problem is forcing us to transform the way we think about issues. And that itself is step one towards the change. You're no longer thinking in terms of, how do I dispose my waste, but you're thinking, not only how do I dispose my waste, but how do I reduce the amount of waste? How do I ensure that whatever waste is produced is also be utilized as an input in another part of the system, and therefore what is left finally is much smaller, and therefore how do I dispose the waste? So your nature of your problem starts changing. But that is why the triple environmental crisis is so critical. We more often than not talk in terms of climate change alone, uh, but that is one reason for that is because in a way it is possible if we speak in a systems manner to encompass the other two problems within its fold. Because as I said, what do I mean by biodiversity loss? It's not just about it's about taking over land which was forest land, or land covered with vegetation and now being used for something else, to set up a city or set up factories. Now, under normal circumstances, we would say, hey, setting up a factory is good because there are jobs created, but there is a price to pay, because once you have cleared the area, you have opened it up for erosion. You could affect the water systems. So that again changes, access to water for us, which is critical to human life. And once you start changing, because forests or trees are carbon sinks, so they hold the excess carbon that you're emitting. You're getting rid of them, so the carbon sink is gone. It again affects climate change. So it's like a circular problem. So that's something that we should keep in mind when we are thinking about this issue and our approach to this issue. Uh, Very often in companies, in countries, in governments, virtually everywhere, we tend to think in groups. So we say, okay, the finance guys have to think about this. The production guys have to think about this. HR guys have to think about this. But the truth is that yes, you still have special functions and you need to think about them. So the finance guy has to look at, how do I ensure that the money being invested is green money that's coming in? So it's not, I am not supporting an industry or money that's coming in that is supporting harming the environment. How do I avoid that? Or how do I design the project in a manner that it is a greener project? So there the production person also comes in. But just see, there's a collaboration here. We are moving away from acting individually to acting collectively. So that's the other part of this issue. Next slide, please. So why should companies care about the triple environmental crisis? Because climate change and its impacts are no longer, possibility of the future. We have seen this summer already how, we reached heat wave conditions, multiple heat wave. We had multiple heat waves starting from March, which is almost unthinkable of, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Though every year, if you go and look back at the temperature chart, you'll realize that it was getting hotter. That we have been getting here slowly and surely. So you have extreme weather events like the heat wave I mentioned, or droughts or floods. But then there is the slow onset events as well, where I mentioned rising temperatures over a period of time. So you go back and do this exercise, you'll see that temperatures in March and April were rising, that they have reached the, what the IMD considers heat wave. That heat wave, to qualify as heat wave, is only a matter of time. Your sea levels are rising. You have factories in Gujarat, so therefore you know what will happen if the water gets saline there. As a production company, you know the criticality of water, let alone as human beings. But as a company, you know the criticality of water. Imagine if it's tougher to get water because you have to, drill deeper to reach the water table, or the water that's accessible is saline. These are, they may seem in another world, but they are impacting choices that will be made in the boardroom. They affect where you source your resources from, inputs from. They affect your costs, because say if you need to source your raw material from a far off place, the cost of transport goes up, let alone forget the emissions that go with it and so on. It's just pure costs that go up. This kind of extreme weather affects human productivity. No matter how much air cooling you do you can't air cool beyond a point on the shop floor, because your machines need to work at a certain temperature, or they will work and produce a certain level of heat. How much can you protect the people who are working there? So obviously, each of these factors will affect the choices that are made. They affect your cost calculation. So that is one major reason why I think companies should consider to treat environmental crisis, climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss as critical. There is, as I have been saying, a strong economic impact. There are studies that have been done that put the range of impact on the GDP from anywhere between 2.5 to 4% of GDP. That's a lot, to lose to climate change. I mean, think about it. Forget about it in terms of numbers. Think about it as an everyday person. When you stepped out in the hot days of April, or even now in May, before the thunderstorm and everything happened, you would see that you got tired more easily. You were just able to work that much less. That affects your productivity. If you produce less, that affects your income. Uh, there is there is something that's critical for companies, because we have consistently looked at environmental issues as having a cost. It costs more to mitigate. It'll cost me more to build a road that goes around a forest area. It'll cost me more to put in pollution control devices in my stack. But think about this. The cost of not addressing this is much bigger. So it's a choice. You want to pay upfront now, or do you want to pay much more later? Next slide, please. So once again, why should companies care about the triple environmental crisis? This comes home in very loud ways. Investors are beginning to make their concerns felt. You have court cases. You have a spate of court cases in Europe. You have the Shell case, the Agenda case, where the courts demanded that companies pay up, make reparations. ESG frameworks. I mean, they're still voluntary in India, but we'll soon get to a place where they cease to be voluntary. And there is a timeline already. And therefore, this is critical. If you, I mean, one of the many things that a company needs is capital infusion. If investors start saying, hey, I don't think your company is sustainable, I don't think your company is doing all it can to reduce the harm on environment, I don't think I want to put in money, that's a big blow. So therefore, critically, investors start asking questions. Disclosure norms, they're voluntary, but you soon start having, the SEBI and regulators saying, tell us more, give us more data points. They're already asking, but soon they'll be telling you have to do it. Governments are putting in policies that reduce focus on reducing environmental impact, reducing emissions, net zero commitments. They're not always very, very uniform or very, very clear, especially in the Indian condition. We sometimes see a move being made on one side and a measure being taken on the other side that seems to nullify the environmental measure. But here's the thing, all that is great. Maybe a company will say, oh, great, the government is not really forcing us or has given us a loophole or provided us a way out. But think about this for a second. Major economies in this world, whether it's the United States, definitely the European Union and the United Kingdom, and to some extent the US, though they're a little shaky at the moment, they're all but we see it in both in the UK and the European Union, that they are putting in place policies that are about transitioning away from reducing environmental impact as much as is possible and taking measures to counter. They're putting in the policies, they're putting in the frameworks. They are then next going to say it impacts the way we do trade with you, the way. So as companies in India want to have a global imprint, whether they want to set up offices somewhere else or be part of a supply chain or expand or just trade, it will matter. So even if you have a government at home that is saying, okay, fine, you can take a little more time to do this, you will see the external compulsions are getting bigger and bigger, because they'll say, hey, you have a choice not to come here and sell your product. You can sell your product where they're okay with your rules. So therefore, that is one of the drivers why companies need to move. And the interesting part of the story is this: is that we have seen time and time again, not just in India but across the world, because governments represent a much wider swathe of people and not just industry. They have to take many measures. They can move. Sometimes it will seem like they're moving 2 steps ahead and 1 step back or half a step back, or they're moving what say one stakeholder thinks should be 3 steps ahead, but another stakeholder says no, they should only move 1 step ahead. So the government ends up moving say only 1.5 steps ahead, so like a compromise, because it has to ensure that it can get all people, because government represents all people, not just one set of stakeholders, right? And uh, and if companies sort of realize that addressing environmental crisis, whether it's in the form of adopting ESG frameworks, where you are putting environmental concerns at the core of your company's operations, or taking climate actions or setting targets for themselves, which make climate action more real, or taking most or approaching your business in a more sustainable fashion, it gives governments the comfort to move further ahead. Say, okay, we this is a big stakeholder and they are saying they can do X. Can we do X plus? And to do X plus, these are the things I need to do. So it becomes then again a participatory affair. So that's why companies should care about the environmental crisis, because it impacts on how they will operate. Either they have to do it alone on their own, or they can do it together as part of a larger group. The growth areas of the future, literally starting tomorrow, are in these areas where take note and act on the environmental crisis. So whether we are talking about cleaner processes, I'll come to an example a little later, but how do you reduce the carbon footprint or the emissions, GHG emissions footprint of your operations using renewable energy where you can. You have a system of using reducing wastewater. Now, all these are measures that you're taking, but imagine if tomorrow that becomes a new revenue potential, that becomes the area where you can actually grow your business in. So it is not a dead weight. Responding to environmental crisis, be pollution, biodiversity loss, or climate change, is not a dead weight. Neither is it something that we are looking at. Uh, Neither is it something that you should be looking at as this is a good thing to do, so therefore I'm doing it. It's actually critical to your business. It could be your core business. One of my favorite examples is DSM in the Netherlands. It's a mining company. It used to be a mining company. Go and check it out. It's no longer a mining company. Of course, they have transitioned over the years, but they are now at the heart of what is a sustainable industry, sustainable company, because they're looking at all manner of things and they're moved away from core mining, because that was the two ways of looking at it, right? You can say they grew a conscience, which is possible, but it's also that it was an industry that was, moving towards sunset. They spotted the sunrise options. That is what companies need to do, because as companies, you have to create value for your stockholder. With ESG, we learn that stockholder value is not just about increasing your bottom line, but it's also about environmental, social, and governance issues. Now, interestingly, Indian companies are doing better, relatively better on the governance and policy side than on the environmental and social side. So imagine if you can step in and start doing things that look at your company in through the lens of improved environmental, social compliance, or social norms, and then you actually create a business opportunity. Not only do you have reputational improvement, but you will see there might be new options coming along. As I said, it makes better business sense. The world's changing. You can be a follower or you can be a leader. And the ESG sort of framework gives us a like a sense of what you can do. But you still need to think out of the box. Next slide, please. What does this mean for a manufacturing company? It means reducing contribution to GHG emissions and pollutants, resource efficiency, reducing waste, retaining and using resources for longer within the system, innovating, ensuring sustainability, not just environmental, social, but also financial. If you have a company that is, if you're moving in a direction that takes cognizance of the biggest challenge that humanity faces, and you're addressing that, I'm not saying you're solving that. No one company, no one government can do it on their own, but you're addressing that, you're seeking to change the curve, then it means that you're putting your business on a firm footing. It means that you will grow in the future. So it's financially viable also. So sustainability, we keep thinking in terms of environmental sustainability, but think about it this way: environmental sustainability is also financial sustainability. Resource efficiency, again, a big contributor. It's one of those less glamorous sides of this conversation, because I mean, who is thinking about resource thing? But think about it like your household budget. You just have X amount of money. How do you make that X amount of money run for longer? You have X amount of resources. You can choose to say, finish it all in a manner and waste 50% of it, or you may be very good and not waste and waste only 25% of it. But think about it this way: can you make that 100% run for longer, so it actually functionally operates like 200%? Can you ensure that what waste you produce is actually becomes an input to something else? Like, let me give you an example. We have, over the last few years, we have seen many municipalities use plastic waste as an input in road construction. Now, plastic waste is literally waste. It's like worse than waste, because it won't disintegrate. It will sit in a landfill and sit there and degrade the soil and just sit there and add to our problem. But there are municipalities across the country who have found a solution, because the government now requires more people. I mean, virtually every road construction to consider or try and reach this thing. But some municipalities have been very good, and they have ensured that at least some of that waste actually ceases to be waste and becomes an input. So somebody's waste, somebody's fortune, somebody's wealth, that kind of a thing. So that's very critical. Resource efficiency. Innovating, that is the key. You have to consistently innovate. Now, think about it. We could move on to the next slide, please. Uh, we could think about it exactly what it means for the company like JHCL. Now, you're in the soda ash on the chemical side, on soda ash, which is critical for detergents and glass industry and baking soda. Now, and on textile side, you're making yarns. You're basically imports in industry. Now, if you have an input which has a lower carbon footprint, and you're adding less to pollution, the company that gets you into the that uses your input also reduces its carbon footprint in the production. So soda ash produced by GHCL has low carbon footprint, but when that is picked up by a detergent making company or a glass industry, their product also has a lower footprint because they've got an input which is cleaner. So it creates a virtuous cycle of you know of more sustainable or environmental friendly products. So therefore, that's one. So that the broadly three things. What I just described is reducing the emissions footprint of your product. Then you reduce the emissions footprint of your operations, which is what kind of energy do you use? Do you source more from renewables? Are you using do you have a better waste collection system? Are you sort of contributing to creating a waste recycling system, and so on and so forth? So how much of a footprint does your own operation generate? The process of producing the product, and then of course creating better products. So as I mentioned DSM earlier, DSM used to be mining, but they moved on to something else. Today, you produce soda ash. Today, there is a certain level of emissions because of carbon dioxide production, calcium carbonate use in your process, that there is a certain level of carbon dioxide that will get produced in your processes. Can you make a product that actually reduces the amount of carbon dioxide you produce? So you're improving on your product. That's one option. The other option is, can you think of a product which actually functions exactly like soda ash without the problems associated with it, which is its carbon footprint. So these are all questions that you need to be thinking about at every stage, but collectively, because that's the only way we are going to move ahead. So next slide, please. So I made a list of what JSL is already doing, and I don't need to repeat it because y'all are doing it. But if you go through that list, you will see that they are of varying levels. So you have reducing water wastage, then you have developing value-added products from waste, and collecting and how you're collecting plastic waste. That's an interesting one because you're talking in terms of EPR framework, which basically means government policy becomes useful as a guiding tool for you. Then how you use transportation, you do full load, then the way you step out and plant mangroves. So the list goes on, right? About energy conservation practices using renewable energy. Now, the thing about the ESG framework is, which I keep coming back to, and climate action in that sense, is that it will require more and more deepening of these activities. So you'll have to look for new areas and new ways. So it's not enough that you are, let's say, you have a timer system and lights go off, or you instill energy conservation sort of habits in, say, your office areas, and it's not enough that you're doing renewable energy, using renewable energy. Maybe the next step is that when you build a new office, it is such that it uses natural light more effectively, or it reduces its cooling requirement. So basically, you have to keep moving. This is like a curve that never ends. You're literally on it. You're on that staircase, and there's no end to it, because you'll always find a way to do better, which use energy more effectively. So one of the things that I as I understand it, as companies, and definitely as companies, but every stakeholder does collectively, you have to have one core mantra, and that is, how do we use our resources better, more efficiently, and keep it in the system for a longer period, so as to reduce waste. And if we are able to do that, then we will have extracted the best value for the resources, and done the least amount of damage to 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 our surroundings and to ourselves. Next slide, please. So, choosing growth over survival. I thought of this because very often it's about companies saying when the policy comes in, we'll do things, or okay, let's wait and see what the government is doing. But there's a lot about climate neutrality and net zero goals that as such, the goals themselves will require a radical transformation. It'll change the way we live, work, consume, produce, materials we use, materials we produce. Everything is bound to change. We are going to look at things very differently, uh, hopefully here on out. Because, as I said once again, the heart of it you could look at resource efficiency as at the heart of it, because that tells us a lot about how we use materials, how we use resources, and how we consume them, and how we intend to consume them. So we can think of this as this transformation that's waiting to happen. Now that is happening whether we like it or not. We can think of it as a hurdle, as something, oh my God, it creates cost, or you think about it as an opportunity. I mentioned this example of tuticorin alkali chemicals because the story emerged in 2017, and it was again exactly in your area of work, which is the soda ash manufacturing, and they started utilizing the carbon dioxide that was being produced in their boilers as an input into their production process. What happened very interestingly is that there are a couple of very interesting sides to this thing. So one was that they were using the CO2 from their own boiler to make soda ash, and then as a result of which, what happened is the system required less energy. It was less corrosive, so it has required less equipment. And in terms of creating the uh, the creating the equipment, it required less of an investment. So they saved in terms of input, material input. They also saved in terms of the system that was required. And if you Google and go back and look at these stories, then you will on this thing you'll see that the owner, who is quoted in several stories, says, I really did not think in terms of environment or anything, but I just realized also that it costs me less to do this, so I can do more with less investment. And I think that is where, there is nothing wrong in looking at it not as something that is an imposition, but an opportunity to do better. We have seen this. It's not that we haven't seen this. We see it in the use of fly ash in bricks. We see it in the use of plastics in roads. But what I'm saying is slightly different, and that is how we approach the issue. It shouldn't be that, oh, we are required to put in so much plastic, but look at it as what is it that, how is it something that you are doing that actually improves your viability of your business? Even if you look at it as a pure rupee and paisa sort of decision, it is something that is that is not wrong. It is right. It is a way of looking at it, and you should look at it in that manner, because this is the moment that companies can leverage to create opportunities for growing their business, and it might grow in a very different direction. Imagine this. While preparing for this morning, I was reading about the various, techniques or processes of creating soda ash, and some of them, like the solvate technique, I think, process. It is now they have found ways to reduce its emissions imprint. Imagine tomorrow that there could be a whole new technique of creating soda ash, which is far superior, or there could be yet a new product that does all the work that soda ash needs to do without any of its, with a much reduced carbon environmental imprint or no imprint. It could mean you know, the industry changes completely. The glass making and detergent making industries will change. Can companies be at that point where you are looking at it as, okay, I'm doing this and I'm going to do this better, but what can I do to leverage what I know now to do something even better? So therefore, preparing for the the business of the future. Next slide, please. Innovate to grow. This is another, like if I told you that resource efficiency was a central pillar of how you're going to do business in an ESG framework, while considering ESG, while considering operating in an environmentally climate constrained world, innovation is the other critical pillar. Innovation is critical, and this is where you will have leaders and you'll have followers. Now, there are ways the companies can support innovation, whether internally or externally. There are formal and informal channels. You build partnerships. You build partnerships. The example I gave you of the tuticorin alkali chemicals, the company that actually did this is called Carbon Clean, and there were two IIT chemists. But when they went around looking for finances to support them, they got none. No financial institution in India supported them. They then got support from the government of the United Kingdom. So basically, it's technology now that is owned by the government of the United Kingdom. So actually, it emerged out of an IIT here. Can we make that thing as companies with standing, which are already leaders in the field? Can you see yourselves as supporting innovation, which will help you? So, of course, there is nothing stopping somebody who's created a technology to go to 10 other people, but you will be market leaders because you will have fostered them in the beginning. So obviously you'll have advantages being first movers. Partnerships like that, paying it forward. There are smaller companies, or there are input companies, companies that input into your industry, into your company. How do you ensure that they too can make the transition? I'm sure that you would have gone to conferences and heard endlessly about MSMEs not being able to, make the transition, which is true, especially the micro units. How do you then create that atmosphere within your own supply chain? I'm not saying that go beyond and and try to sort of become the messiah of the industry, but can you be the vanguards of change within your own little world? Push for innovation. Now, what do I mean for that? I mean that there should be ways in which you push governments to say, okay, can you have a financial sort of system or a structure that actually favors people like these two chemists from IIT who had to go overseas to get support? Why is that the case? So, but when that demand comes from you, then that changes. It again changes the way you're assessed, because your governance structure will change. When you're putting money into innovation, what do you value within the industry? What do you value within the company? Your social structure changes within the thing. You have to work individually, both as individual, as individuals within a company, as individual companies, and collectively. So you work collectively as everybody in JSCL, or and also as collectively as companies that are associated with you, or collectively as companies that are in the chemical segment. So, but whichever way, innovation is critical to growth. Next slide, please. I think we're just almost done. I come back to this. What does it mean to operate in a climate constrained world? You will see that it is possible to increase income by disregarding some environmental concerns, by saying, okay, we don't have to do it right now. The rules don't require us, but it will not be possible to grow wealth, because the corners you cut here, or the costs that you don't incur, will come back as costs on the other side. So let me give you an example, which is not a company example, but a very easy one to understand. The measures we don't take to improve air quality come back as higher medical bills for people. So yes, you're saving on when a coal power plant says, I'm not going to put in pollution control technologies because it's going to increase the cost of power and people can't pay. Yes, people will continue to pay a lower price because it's still cheaper. You're not incurring that extra cost, but what you save more than that, you're spending on the doctor. So yeah, your income, the income may keep growing, but your wealth doesn't, because health is also wealth. Environmental and climate action is not a cost. Think about it as an investment with rewards. And again, that changes. Remember what I said about transforming, the economy and society. It starts with how you change the way you think. So you have to approach environment in that manner. Climate change, environmental degradations, biodiversity losses are changing the underpinnings of the world. Sorry, there's a typo, I made a mistake. World as we know it. Business too must change to adapt to this broader change and ensure the planetary boundaries are not crossed. At the end of the day, companies and human beings exist in this setup. When we talk about biodiversity, it is not somewhere else. It is we are part of that. So we have to ensure that the way we are able to address and stop the changes that are happening. So what does it mean for companies? It means that companies have to think of themselves as stakeholders, not as something outside. You are part of the system. We are all in the whale. We are not outside of the whale. Uh, Next slide, please. I think that should be the last one. What's next? Ambitious goals backed up by clear plans, roadmaps with milestones. That's critical because it will give all those who interact with you a sense of what you are planning. If you say, I'm going to reduce the emissions we incur as a company by 50%, you also have to then say, what are the things you're thinking of? I'm not saying give away your secrets, but you should have a broad plan so that those who are dealing with you know. Let's say that you say, again, not an exact example, but you say, okay, we are going to reduce the amount of plastic we consume. So the vendor knows that if I'm coming to JSCL, I'm not going to sell him plastic items because then they're not going to take it. I will think of other items, maybe glass, maybe paper, maybe something else, a newer product. And that is critical because it gives signals to each other. It is a super wicked problem, but there is no way out of it. And what is becoming increasingly clear is that policy, whether it's national or international, sort of policy and patterns are working towards ensuring that all companies, all stakeholders start taking these issues seriously. The question is, do you want to follow or do you want to lead? And I think there is an opportunity to lead. Thank you so much. And yes, I'm open to taking questions now. Somebody curating the questions?
Yes. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, Urmi, for this wonderful talk. And I know, I think at least for me, I think it was really very interesting and a lot to learn too.
Sorry.
So during this talk, we, like I said earlier, we were taking certain questions from our colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And a few of them have come up. So I'll start with the first question that came up, which, I would like to take it because this is the first question that came up. And I know it has been answered during the course of your talk, but nonetheless. Mr. Gaurav Dodia wants to ask, what happens if we do nothing to stop climate change?
Well, you saw the summer we are just having. That will seem like a walk in the park. It's going to get worse. That's just one example. The pressures will go up. Water stress will increase. Your ability to function will come down. And the problem is that the solutions that we opt for as individuals, let's say buying more air conditioning, practitioners is not helping. It's adding to the problem. So we will be in this, self-defeating cycle. I shudder to think what's going to happen next, but let me put it this way: it's not going to be very pleasant. So I don't think not acting is an option. I think that's not an option anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I just, it reminds us of all the science fiction novels that we read when we were kids, all
Yeah,
things
it's
that,
all come true.
yeah, right. Okay, thank you for that, for the response. The next question is from Neeraj Bhavsar. He wants to know, is there any other way to reduce GHG emission for industry other than other than transferring to renewable energy?
Well, yes, there are many options. I mean, in terms of energy use, it is unlikely that your solar manufacturing is going to happen or based on solar or wind power, at least not at the way, not at the level at which it is now. So it could mean alternative fuels, whether it's hydrogen or some fuel that is being worked upon now, or a different process. Now that energy use is one option, which is big because energy is, for India, it's about 76% of our emissions come from energy use, which is not just electricity, it is all manner of energy. Industrial processes are a much smaller group, but we are hoping industry is going to grow, and therefore, emissions there will grow. So why we keep talking in terms of energy and then industrial processes, because energy use is the biggest. Uh, that's one. But I think more critically for manufacturing units in the manufacturing sector, it's about how you use your resources. Think about it this way: the less calcium carbonates you have to dig out, it's better, because you are preventing pollution and preventing an impact right at the source of your first input. So improved processes which are more resource efficient will have an impact on lowering your GHG. I think we far too long we speak about reducing impact in terms of reducing GHG, and we look at end processes. I'm saying that you need to widen your lens and look at it right through the life cycle of your product. So therefore, you start from where you get your raw materials and how much energy gets used in it. And you will be surprised. They may seem little amounts, but when you add up, it's a huge amount. It's literally that every drop counts. It is literally something like that. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but I hope that I've gotten somewhere close to addressing your question.
Yeah, I know. The problem is so humongous that sometimes you feel. I mean,
Yeah, you just want to give up.
Yeah, true. Okay, so Nikul Malia wants to know, what are your thoughts on carbon offset scam going on in the world? Is it a reliable solution?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think that becomes a whole new webinar on its own on carbon offsets. There is an attempt in the world. There is a lot of effort. There's a recognition that yes, it can be a huge scam, and we have seen how the CDM situation sort of deteriorated on its own. And of course, there were many issues, but one of them was obviously the the fact that there were issues regarding his integrity. But this is something that the world is fully aware of. So you would know that there is an effort from the level of the UN Secretary General to look at voluntary carbon offsets and voluntary carbon markets, trying to see that there is no greenwashing. Now, it is an ongoing problem, but I'm going to rely on Churchill and say that the price we pay for freedom is ever vigilant. So the price we have to pay for using offsets is to be vigilant. Now it's up to us as stakeholders within companies, in society, to ensure that we are not taking the easy way out. We are not getting involved in scamming on the offsets. Rules are being put in place, but as I said, again, compliance is again a very national issue. We can have international rules, but compliance is always national. Uh, but yes, as I said, carbon offsets is a whole different, like a webinar or two out there, and it is a concern. But it is something we have to be vigilant of, and companies need to be very careful when they are going for this. Because I mean, what is the carbon offset at the end of the day? Is that you say, okay, I'm producing X amount, and I'm going to do Y to offset the amount I've produced. It seems like such an easy thing. But the problem is this, that the atmosphere doesn't really need you to be at this level. The atmosphere needs you to have reduced this. So is your carbon offsetting going to be, how do you make it a robust kind of offsetting? Because at the end of the day, as a manufacturing unit, you will know that there are some emissions that you cannot avoid, no matter how good and how perfect you are, you will not be able to avoid it. So how do we do that? So as I said, it's something we have to constantly about, work on, have more conversations with. The good news is that we are still very early in the day on this conversation. There are many happening, participating, talking about the problems that you face, issues that you face, areas where you need to offset could actually help create a more robust system.
Yeah, sure. And I also agree that yes, carbon offset does require another webinar, maybe another day, another time, whenever you have the yeah, Urmi. Okay. So Pankaj wants to know what can we as individuals. So basically, he says, what can I do to stop climate change?
Well, everything that we do can make a difference, and there are two parts: there's action, and there is a demand for things. So I would say that, can we as individuals try and push for using more public transport? Let's say that means, because if we start aggregating the energy consumption of moving from place A to B, then by aggregating, and if possible by not doing so, let's say walking instead of bicycling, instead of taking a car out, or taking public transport, be it a metro or bus, or a train or tram, to get somewhere, will make a difference. Now, the very quick comeback very often is that in many of our cities, there is no robust public transport system. What are we doing to put it on an issue, on the agenda? Let's say in the last few weeks, when we have spoken endlessly about how petrol and diesel prices are going up, and we keep complaining about it, have we ever complained to say, hey, why aren't you using this moment to make better public transport so that people don't have to take out their cars? Because we do understand that these prices are international prices. Everybody doesn't have a control on them. But can we find a way to actually reduce our dependence on them? Because if you had better public transport, I would hop onto a bus and I would sit and read instead of having to drive and navigate, my car in the traffic. It would improve air quality. So there are measures, there are many measures like that when you take, which you can take at an individual level. But then there are also measures that you can take collectively, where you create the opinion to say, okay, fine. I mean, I'm not saying that JSTL doesn't have this or has it, but let's say that you have you realize that most of your that a bulk of your staff comes from 3 or 4 sort of areas, not localities, but 3 or 4 sort of geographic areas within your city. Is is there a way you can create a transport system of your own in the absence of a public transport system that actually helps ferry people from a particular designated point to your office? And okay, fine, is there somebody within the office who's saying, can we ask the company to do this? Or can the company say, if you are taking public transport, so if you're taking the metro, I'm presuming, let's say your office premises somewhere near a metro line. I mean, and think if you are using the metro 4 times or 5 times a week, there is a benefit. We will say top up your metro card by 100 rupees or something. I mean, there are incentives, there are ways to do it. So there are ways to think about it individually, individual action and collective. But beyond the point, you have to push for change. I'm not saying that there's a lot that we can't do ourselves. We can use things better, not throw out everything. Uh, we can repair, we can push for repair. Again, you'll see, oh, the repairman doesn't exist. But if we start demanding that, instead of me throwing out my mobile phone or me throwing out my air conditioner or me throwing out my washing machine, I'm pushing for repair, then that service will also be created because these are demand based. So there are things we can do individually, there are things we can do collectively. There is no limit to action.
And also, at times, I've noticed that there are a lot of organizing. I mean, a lot of these companies which produce these consumer goods, they also have, I mean, they have a department which you can actually call them and they can come and pick up, and they actually dispose of the waste responsibly. So I guess, yeah, maybe we can start reaching out to them too.
Yes, you can have that kind of a relationship. Yes.
Yeah. Just a request to all the participants. I think we have enough questions, so just hold your horses. Yeah. So just one more question from Gaurav Dodia. He says, how do you see our next generation's future looking to the current climate change situation around the world and scarcity of natural resources, heat wave, natural collapse?
Well, as I said, it looks like a dreary future, but it doesn't have to be dreary. That's where the human. If there's one thing that defines the human being, it's about his ability to innovate, the ability to adapt. So this is a problem. We have for very long, for these 30, 40 years, we have not only ignored the problem, but we have added to the problem. The first thing we can do is stop doing that. So it is a lot depends what the future looks like, depends a lot on what you do today. And I think the time has come to stop talking about climate change as a problem of the future. It's a problem of today. So the actions we take will impact in the future, but it'll impact us in our own lifetimes. You don't have to wait till 2100 when many of us won't be around to see what it is like. But that's how I see it. No action, it's a dreary future. I have about another 5 minutes or so. Is that okay?
Yeah, so I'll quickly read out. We just have another 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll quickly take this question from Manishe, right? So he says currently industries are taking baby steps, and same is done by government agencies. But in your opinion, how many years do you think will it take for a country like India to become net zero economy?
Well, the Prime Minister set a goal of getting to net zero by 2070. So basically, there's your answer. You already have the next 50 years to get there. If you get there sooner, the better. But you have a maximum of 50 years to get there. And yes, it is. It's true. We're just starting, but what we do in this decade is critical. So it is time to accelerate those baby steps, to think bigger and beyond. Because how we think, it's not about how much we end up doing, but how we think. The systems we put in place in this decade is what will determine our capacity to meet that goal in 2070. So, yeah, if it takes less time, the better, but because obviously we're expecting technological change, we're expecting companies and cities and regions to move faster, to do things that all add up to accelerating the pace. We're expecting huge innovation, but all that has to happen at least we have to see the glimmer of it now. We have to have the systems in place now in this decade if it's going to have any impact later.
Thank you. Thanks, Urmi. Just one quick last question
Mm-hmm.
ask you. Rajveer Singh Gohil says, he wants to know a lot of Rajveer Singh Gohil wants to know that a lot of efforts have been made by many internal organizations to make people aware about climate change. But still, we have not been able to, mitigate much of the harm that is being done. What could be other ways to act on this more effectively?
Well, one of the things is that the way that global warming operates, unfortunately, is with a lag. So what the emissions of today add up to emissions from the past, and we are paying for what the situation we are in is a product of all the emission that we have done since the industrial age, and we are just adding to that pot right now. The reason why it seems that nothing seems to be moving and people are being made aware, because I think part of the problem is that for far too long we have looked at climate change as A, an environmental issue, and B, as something that will happen in the future. Those two things have changed now. A, it is much more than an environmental issue. It's actually a business issue. The very fact that you're having this webinar means that you see climate change as a risk. Tomorrow you're going to set up a factory in say coastal Gujarat, and you realize that you will not have access to water, because the salinity of the soil and water has gone up exponentially. That changes the way you will the cost of doing business at that factory. The cost of producing soda ash in that factory will change completely. And so it's become a much more real issue. So it's moved from awareness to act. And I think that is where the key is. The reason why we don't see much impact is because we have spoken about it in terms of, something that's good to do, something that's out there. But now it's not out there. It is right here. It is something we are right in the middle of as businesses, as individuals, as citizens, you name it. In each one of our roles, we are facing climate change and its impacts.
Totally agree. So I think we don't have time for more questions now. So just want to say thank you to everyone. And also I would like to invite Mr. Mayuresh Here, and just hear his thoughts about what he thought of the webinar. Mayuresh? Are you there? I think he's having some issue with this connectivity. So anyway, so I would like to thank you, Urmi.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for, on behalf of everyone from GHCL, thank you so much for taking time out and, giving us, so I think we all need to take that wake up call now, find it. I mean, we haven't taken it till now. I think it's time. So, so thanks once again. And we look forward to seeing you for more, for more such talks on important issues which concern us. I mean, which are literally burning our backs now.
Literally. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a pleasure. And hopefully when we do it next, we'll be able to have a more interactive session as well, where I can give more time for questions. But thank you so much. And I hope to hear more about all the measures you'll take,
Absolutely.
going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, and we'll keep you posted.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.